First off, I want to thank the brave men and women who work behind the wall. I want to thank them on a national level because their job goes unrecognized.
How do they try to turn a guard?
Well, correctional officer. Sorry, I apologize. But correctional officer.
How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another episode of Tier Talk. Guys, I'm going to say 3 words to you right now. Document, document, document. Most important tool you'll ever have with communication is also that logbook. And I think today we need to touch on this topic once again. Let's talk about the importance of documentation, what you should document, why you should document. You know, it's key, guys. If we want to have a good career in corrections, document, document, document. Hey, what's up, Gary? How you doing? How's the YouTube channel going?
Hey, how you doing? Well, I think it's going all right. I'm getting new subscribers every month. I think I got 81 new subscribers for May, so I'm happy.
Yeah, you pushed over the 3,000 mark.
Yes, I pushed over the 3,000, trying to head to that next millennial there.
Yeah, you're rocking it, man. I watch all your videos. I know you have a good video that you just posted up today, correct?
Yes, that was about things that could cause you to lose your badge. And matter of fact, it was 10 tips and 10 things that could cause you to lose your badge. And number 1 was about documentation and how you report things. You know, not going outside of the agency and just reporting things. There's a way you properly document and report.
Yeah, people can lose their job for leaking videos unauthorized. Now, guys, it's a very important topic. We're going to really go into some detail here. So, again, if you want to invest some time, this would be a good video to do that. Now, guys, if you haven't, the show Tier Talks for You. Hold on one second, guys. Got to get my sponsor first. Sorry, guys. This video is brought to you by Guardian RFID. From inmate tracking and cell checks to cloud-based business and artificial intelligence, Guardian RFID digitally transforms jails, prisons, and juvenile detention facilities of every size. Visit GuardianRFID.com for more information. Love Guardian, guys. They support what we do and they believe in our message. Now, guys, if you haven't, the show Tier Talks for You, brave men and women that work in corrections, so please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. Bell's going to notify you every time I post a video. We're going to go to our sponsor. Then we're going to come back and talk about document, document, document. All right, stand by.
I wanted to attend a university that had an intelligence program. I wanted to look at problems different. I wanted to increase my critical thinking abilities. AMU offered those avenues to expand. Obtaining your degree as an adult, you're actually paying yourself and investing in yourself. You can't put a dollar on it. It's priceless. It's something that can never be taken away from you.
American Military University. Learn from the leader.
All right, and we are back. So again, guys, great topic to revisit. We have done it before, so feel free to probably put logbook Tier Talk or something like that, and you'll see that we've done these videos before. But I feel, Gary, that it is a good time to revisit this topic. I've seen a lot of stuff in the news lately about documentation. I believe recently the officers in the Epstein case have just admitted, because I guess they cut a deal, that they lied in the logbooks. They never took the tours. So right off the bat, Gary, how important is the logbook? How important is what we document in that logbook?
Well, let me tell you, if you really care about your job and if you care about your future in corrections, and if you have just integrity and you're honest, make sure that you log things in the logbook. Now, listen, even if you're late, don't get scared and say, oh, I'm 5-10 minutes late. I'm just going to have to pretend like I did it on time. You know what? The way we did it here at the detention facility I worked at for the sheriff's office, you know, you can log it late. They may have you do a short incident report on why you logged it late. We had a fight in the dorm. We had this come up. An incident came up. But as long as you're honest, you're not going to be in any trouble. It's when you omit things from your log or falsify your logs, that's when you got a big problem.
Yeah, and I like what you said, because even if it is a little late, you could put late entry into the logbook. You know, put the time and, you know, exactly, because it happens. Sometimes you are running around and you don't get a chance to go back to the logbook right away. For me, I would take my notes, and as soon as I could, I'm putting stuff right in the logbook. I know that there's some officers that actually they don't touch the logbook until the end of their shift. They take all the notes, and then towards the end, they start writing everything that happened throughout the day. I do not recommend that. As soon as you can, empty out what's in that notebook into that logbook. Just write what you can. Don't wait till the bitter end of your shift to start plugging stuff down, because besides the fact that you're probably rushing and you're going to miss things, the other thing is, guys, is that you got someone else that's coming onto the shift, and I've seen officers come onto the shift and are waiting for this other person just to finish what they're putting in the logbook, or when they take over the shift, they notice that there was nothing even put in from the shift before. It's like you just worked 8 hours and you have not put anything in that happened. And let's say it's one of the busier shifts. You haven't put like something as simple as mess being called out, wreck being called out. I mean, the movements in itself, just in general. So have you in your career, again, this is actually a good question, guys, for you guys, if you want to comment on this. There is a lot of inconsistency in what people feel that they should put into the logbook. I mean, there are routine things, and yes, they should be put in the logbook. I also believe as specific as possible. So like, just to give an example, if you have, let's say, a work detail of 15 inmate workers that are going out, some people will just put food service detail called out, 15 inmates out. You should put each one of those inmates' names down, their numbers down. Be as specific as possible. Don't just generalize the information. But do you feel, Gary, that like when you go from like different logbooks, there's a lot of inconsistencies as what people feel need to be put down?
Yes, there's a lot of people with their own opinions. Now, the agency should give a guideline. Now, some agencies are still writing everything down. Some agencies, like the department I just retired from, have the scanner. But the scanner is to go around and show you did your rounds, you did your dorm rounds. I'm scanning that, and it's going to show the exact time that I checked that area. But you still have your logbook for other things. Like you said, 10 inmates out to court. Okay, I don't want to put just 10 inmates out to court. Now they have it on the computer where we can log out each inmate by name. Now you know you have 10 inmates out to court and their names and when they left and when they return. If you don't have the luxury of a computer to do your logbook, where you're not doing it electronically, where some places are, then you need to write down who's out. Because at the end of the day, if I only get 9 inmates back and my count is off, I need to know what inmate did not return from court or from rec or whatever, just an example.
Yeah, and again, I believe the more specifics, the better, because it does help also the officer that may be coming in when those inmates are still out. That officer then can go back to the logbook or whatever it is to say, okay, well, usually I have these 15 inmates out at food service, and it's usually when I come into the shift, they're already out. Especially when you work, again, not all shifts are the same, but if you work in an overnight shift where you let the early morning food service workers out, and then the first shift starts to come in, they're coming in with already, a group of inmates out to food service. When second shift comes in, again, it depends on how your shift structure, but when second shift comes in, they got programming out, they got, details out. So they're walking into the middle of a whole mess of inmates being out. So I think it's kind of disrespectful in one way or another when you're not putting the specifics and exactly where they're at, because anybody coming in, relieving a post where there's a bunch of inmates out at all different locations. I mean, you got to know the location and who those inmates are, and not just 15 here and 20 here and 10 here. So yes, the more specific that you put in that logbook, the more it helps the person coming in who is going to cover that post. So again, I just want to, in my opinion, guys, if you do have those routine things that are happening in the prison, like mess, rec, programs, whatever it is that's being called out, you should be putting that in the logbook, and you should be putting down which inmates are going where. That's very, very important, because God forbid something happens, those logbooks can easily be picked up and brought to the highest level of the court system. So Gary, again, so we should be putting in the books, right? The routine stuff. Let's start with that first. Mess out, wreck out, stuff like that, correct?
Yes, and we even put house inmates out for cleaning. And then house inmates done cleaning, caustic secured. That sounds silly, right? But what if something from the caustics closet is used in some type of incident? Now we didn't document that it was secured back and locked up. So now we got a problem, you know, when we come to look, how did they get a hold of that? You have the key, you issue it to them, they clean. Didn't you have them put that back up? Just get that stuff back and secure it and log it in there that you secured it so that we can figure out how the heck they might have gotten in there.
Yeah, and guys, by the way, when an incident does happen, when it starts making it to the courts, if it does go, they will ask. One of the first things they ask for is, can we have logbooks from these dates? Can we have copies from these dates? So I know it's definitely needed. Another question I think that's interesting too, Gar, is when a supervisor comes into unit. By the way, guys, log anybody that comes into your unit or anybody that comes into here. So let's do that before my next question. You know, anybody that comes into your area needs to be logged into the book. The reason why, and I know, guys, sometimes we want to chat with our friend and whatever it is, but I'm telling you guys something, and this comes from experience. If that person does something foolish and you don't log them in, first off, you're going to be held responsible. But here's another thing. Even if they can't prove that this person did something foolish, but they know they were there and they look back and they say, well, you didn't log this person in, you are going to get in trouble. Not this person, you are. Because I've had people say, hey, Gans, why are you logging me in the book? Well, because you're in my unit. And then you watch, first off, the people that ask that, questionable. If they're going to ask you, why are you putting them in the book? That right there should raise some eyebrows and say, well, why wouldn't I put you in the book? You're in my unit. But for those that come in and say, hey, put me in the book at this time, all right, I got you. You know, because now it's official. And technically, I will say this too. For officers that, I guess it depends, but a good practice here is for officers that tend to go from unit to unit, it's usually better if they do have some permission from a supervisor, if it's not really, you know, if you're working in a like definitely if it's a maximum unit, you really got to limit how many people go in and out of these units that aren't really for professional reasons, if that makes any sense. You know, we want to limit contraband. We want to limit stuff that enters the facilities or enter those areas. So when you have a, let's say I'm in charge of a unit and an officer comes by that maybe I'm not used to seeing, they're not scheduled there. Maybe they just think they can come by and visit. Sometimes it's good for that local control point officer, or if it's not and it's a direct unit officer, whatever it is, to kind of say, hey, which supervisor wants you to come in? You know, I know some people may look at it like, Gangi, we're officers, we should have freedom like that. Nah, you know, I get it, guys, but let's protect ourselves in this too. You know, I'm trying to be universal precaution. If someone starts to come into my unit, you know, not only am I going to log them in my book, but I may want to ask them, hey, do you have the approval of the supervisor to be here? You know, there's nothing wrong with that. I know in facilities I've worked at before, possibly the facility I work at now, in quotes, and I don't really like talking too much about my job, but you really aren't allowed to visit other units. That means if I'm a unit officer, unless it's professional, but then again, I'll get the approval from my supervisor. Unless it's professional, it's one thing. But if you think you just casually go from one unit into the other, sometimes that requires the supervisor's permission. And if you keep on asking that supervisor to go to that unit, sometimes that could be a red flag as well. Again, it's doing our part to control what could be the spread of contraband if we have that one rogue officer. What's your thoughts on that, Gar?
Well, number one, we're assigned to our dorms for a reason. And with staff shortage now, we're at critical. Many times our shift is at critical. So you must stay where you're assigned and you shouldn't be running around. Now, I think everybody out there knows that one officer that likes to go visiting. And for that reason, you need to put down when they come visit your dorm. You're not being a tattletale, but here's what happens. You don't log down who comes in your dorm and something goes down, something bad goes down. When you're questioned, we're going to say, who else was in the dorm with you? Were there any other officers present? You might go, I think there was, I believe there was, but I can't remember who it was now, you know, because we need to know who was in that dorm. This is a serious incident has occurred, and we want to get statements from everybody that worked that dorm, even if you're just dropping by and it happens while you're in that dorm. So there's so many reasons why we need to know who is in the dorm and when they leave the dorm, including supervisors. Sergeant Aguilar on post for a security check, whatever. Sergeant Aguilar departs. Now I know Sergeant Aguilar was there for 10 minutes, but he was doing his job because he was checking to make sure everything's okay, asking you if you need anything, and doing a security check. And what he should be doing is looking at your log as well, since we're talking about logs. And that sergeant should be saying, okay, your log is up to date. Good job. If your log is not up to date, that sergeant should look at you and say, hey, what's up? Looks like you got 2 hours missing in this log. We got a problem. I need you to get it caught up, but I need an incident report now. I need to know why we're behind 2 hours, you know? So there's all kinds of reasons why these little things that you may not think are so important are very important.
Yeah, and I want people to know, if you're a professional officer, what we just mentioned about getting the permission from the supervisor to go, or because I'm hoping it's for professional reasons, you're not going to see a problem with what we just said. You know, you have to understand, we have to teach what's correct. And believe it or not, there's a liability there too. So that also protects you. Because when you have these inmates that try to make these false allegations, you can lean on the logbook because it's a trustworthy logbook. You can lean on the supervisor who's going to say no. And by the way, they would usually go to me for permission to do that. So it gives you buffers as well to protect. I want people to know that sometimes when we feel that there's limits, like even when we're wearing body cams, you got to realize these are things that can help us. You know, they're not always, you know, I don't want us to look at things in the wrong way. The only problem is I know why we tend to do it, because when we have items like, let's say, body cams and stuff like that get introduced into our profession, it usually gets introduced based on some foolish stuff that we've done. But people don't realize that those introductions of those, let's say, body cams, they also help us because there's going to be false allegations being made. So stuff like that, even with the, you know, if you have, you know, an officer that likes to wander, I'm protecting the officer who may not want them in their unit. You know, so they should have to go to that supervisor, because maybe there's a rookie officer that may have a problem telling a senior officer, you know, I got to put you in a logbook or I don't want you in my unit. You know, so I think it's good for us to also say, you know what, they need that buffer as well. You know, they need someone to authorize that. And then when the person's coming down, it could be maybe a sergeant over the radio announcing it, or a phone call. Hey, York, hey, I got Gangi coming your way. He's there to, I don't know, pick up some count sheets or do an inventory for me, whatever the job would be. But definitely communication. One of the other things I had, because you mentioned something about like sometimes you don't write something in the logbook for a while. Like I remember being a supervisor and someone telling me, hey, skip 5 lines because they needed the lines to write. But let me ask you a question though. Here's the funny thing. I do believe that the supervisors need to check the logbooks when they do their rounds. Now, by the way, guys, let me also add something else. The logbooks, because people know the consequences of lying in a logbook, logbooks are usually believable for the most part. They have something in the logbook. If it's written, it usually holds a lot of weight unless there's a reason to question the credibility of the writer. Because even me, I lean on logbooks of my officers all the time unless there's a reason not to, unless there's a reason to go a step further. And we do that because, first off, I can safely assume the integrity, of the officers that are writing it. unless there's a reason not to. By the way, when you're in a law enforcement profession like ours, you are going to get the benefit of the doubt unless there's a reason not to. So don't destroy that. That's given to you right off the bat when you take that sworn oath, unless there's a reason for it to be taken away, which is usually by the actions of that individual. And that kind of sucks, because then it all gets generalized, and now we're second guessing anybody that wears blue. But with that said, the strength of the logbook carries a lot of initial weight. It carries a lot of initial weight. So when the supervisor does their round, I love what Gary said. What's the supervisor doing? He's going through that logbook at that point to see what has been done. So when you have something that's not written in there for the course of a few hours, and there's really no reason why it couldn't be written there, it's just that you're maybe, I don't know, delayed for you're chatting with your friends or whatever it is, guys, the supervisor should come back on you and say, yo, fill this up before I sign anything. Because here's the thing, Gary. As a supervisor, I go in to sign something, right? And then the guy goes, hey, wait, I didn't put my stuff in, so skip 5 lines and I'll put my stuff in. Okay. So let's say I sign underneath and he puts in the 5 lines before that. I have no idea what those 5 lines are going to be. So now what happens is once I sign below that, what am I also saying? That I reviewed everything that was before that. So if he put something foolish there within those 4 or 5 lines and I signed after that, guess what, Gary? I'm in some shit. Because I'm probably going to forget that he didn't write those 5 lines.
Right, because what if something happens during that 5-line omission, whether it's temporarily omitted or whatever, a suicide, let's say, happens, and you are not aware of it happening, and then you find out, oh God, I've got a suicide here in the cell, and the sergeant just left, and I've got this blank space in my logbook, but the sergeant signed. Now he's in a mess because they're going to say, well, you were in there about the time of the suicide, and not that it's going to, if an investigation would be warranted. We don't know what's going to happen, but just trying to give you an example of what can happen if you sign and leave those lines blank. You don't know what has occurred during that time. And now you as a supervisor are going to be under the gun as well.
Yeah, because you're signing underneath the lines that you should have already reviewed. And little other thing too, let's say that person needs more than 5 lines. Now, all of a sudden they start to cram or omit information because, oh my God, I don't want to write past the supervisor. So now they're like, okay, maybe I don't got to write this or this or this, because they want to keep it with the 5 lines of the supervisor. So again, as a supervisor, remember, one of your responsibilities is checking that logbook. And if that person does not have those lines filled out, do not sign ahead and then say, hey, I know you're going to put this in later. No, let them put it in and then you sign. Because as you said, you don't know what you're going to sign for. If I sign here, I don't know what you're going to put beforehand. But another thing is this too, guys. I noticed that when supervisors come into the unit, some of them sign themselves in. And then some will require the officer to sign them in. Now, I've had officers that have said, hey, Gange, it's my logbook. I'm going to sign you in. And then I actually agree that we should sign ourselves in. The reason why is, one, it shows that you've been on site. Now, mind you, when I take the logbook to sign, the officer could be there watching me sign it. I have no problem with that. I get that. Because when it's your logbook, that's your logbook for those 8 hours. You got to protect that like gold. When you're not by that podium or whatever it is, that logbook's got to be secured. I get it. But if by chance the supervisor is going to sign the logbook, because they should, the reason why you want it to be the supervisor and not the officer is, one, their signature matters. It's their handwriting. So, I was there in that unit. You can't say, well, this supervisor called and had me sign. Nope. I was in the unit. That's my signature. That's my handwriting. Also, you have to take the logbook. You have to review it anyway. So, take the logbook, review it, and then sign that you were on post. But for the officers that want to, well, you know what? It's my logbook. I'll just sign the supervisor in. I get it because you're protecting the logbook, but I still believe that you should have the supervisor sign themselves in, because that signature is, one, holds them accountable, but it also shows that what? If I was able to look into that logbook and sign my name, what else did I do? I should have reviewed everything that was before it. So what's your thoughts, Gary? Do you think that the officers should let the supervisor sign themselves in, or should they sign the supervisor in?
Here's what I like. Every supervisor where I just retired from has a black ink pen and a red ink pen. When they come into that dorm or that pod, whether you're in prison or jail, the supervisor signs their name, that they are there, and the time that they are there. Now, if you're working a 12-hour shift, you're going to have 3 or 4 red ink signatures. That's the best way to show that your supervisor was there. I never took it to heart that the supervisor was going to come in and sign his name with red ink in the logbook. What's that going to bother me? I don't care. That's part of the job. That's what we got to do. So if you take that to heart and you feel all concerned that the supervisor signing their name, don't. It's no big deal. It's protecting you. Believe it or not, that protects you, the officer. Now you got your logins, and you have backup. What if you're questioned down the road? You can say, well, my sergeant signature is there as well. He came in or she came in, and there's a signature in red. You know, everything was fine at that time. Nothing was going on. It's protection, folks, covering each other's back.
Right. Now, by the way, we're saying the supervisors. For anybody else, I believe that you can log them in, right? Would you agree with that? We're just talking about the supervisors, right?
Right. No, if you have some type of chaplain service coming in, if you have some type of volunteer coming in and you put them in the room next door with 5 inmates for special service, you sign them in. They're not going to sign themselves in. We're talking supervisors. Anybody else, chaplain, volunteers, anybody, you sign them in and make sure they're good to go.
Right. I like what you said. Obviously, the supervisor should sign themselves in red. If by chance you can't find a red pen, we've actually done a highlighter. You know, so you just put the highlighter in, you know, but again, it's something that does stand out. Also, when you have an unusual incident, something, obviously, I'm a big fan of just putting any unusual incident in, because even if someone says it's not warranted, okay, but I'd rather it be in than as opposed to, you know, the opposite of that, where it is warranted and I don't know if it should be. No, I just put everything in just in case. And again, it covers you. But those incidences, the unusual incidences, same thing. I wouldn't put them in red, but for the unusual incidences, what I did was write it out, and then I would highlight, and I would put stars, and I would put something to signify that at this moment, this happened. You know, like a fight, a lock, and also the investigators. Like, so the people, anybody that got red ink for us are going to be supervisors, administration, investigators. I think that would be it, because anybody on the civilian side would kind of just blend in with us, you know, the regular color, the blue ink, whatnot. But for the most part, guys, the reason why we do that is because we want those moments to stick out in that book. So if we have to quickly recall something, we want that moment to stand out. We don't want to be searching through the book to find it. We want that moment to stand out. Another thing I also want to mention too is, guys, and there's a lot to cover here, but let's just go the distance. I mean, what the heck? When your count changes, don't forget to put that in multiple places. I'm sure you're going to have another log book that has your count that goes up and down. And I get that. That's a great book to have. That's your unit count book, whatever you want to call it. But also in your generalized log book, you know, you should take note of when that count goes down or up. You know, so again, you could put the specifics in a transfer log book if you have that, like inmate such and such, you know, no longer on the count, whatever it is. And, you know, and that documents either the person leaving or coming in. But also when you have any change of population, make note of that your log. But that to me is also a specialized note. Just phone call from whatever inmates now been remanded to court. Population goes from 40 to 39. So now, because as an officer, the first thing I would do to come in, this was kind of like my routine. Obviously exchanging information, doing my tool counts, doing my rounds. Whatever you're signing off for in exchange, like how many keys, all this other stuff, what I'm in charge of, like security items. But then I would also go check my logbook. Okay, I have a total pop of, let's say, 40, and I would also check my transfer log and to see if they match. Okay, I got 40 on my logbook and I got 40 on my transfer log. It's funny because there were times where they didn't match. Where your transfer log has, let's say, 40, but your regular log and you're calling in is a count of 39. And you don't want to mess up that count. So, when you're calling in, it's like, oh, like maybe it's a census count you're doing. Oh, I got 39. The lieutenant's just going to hang up. They're not going to tell you, how you just messed up your count. And it's like, man, what the hell? So you go back to your transfer log, and your transfer log says, hold on, I lost you. The transfer log says 40. Now it's like, well, wait a second, man. These two numbers don't match. So I don't know how other facilities do it, Gary. I don't know if you're familiar with the practice, but there should be a transfer log, and then there should be a your regular log book that also keeps track of what that population is. And it is best that you make sure those numbers are consistent. Would you agree?
Yeah, listen, the worst thing you don't want to have happen to you is be the reason we end up doing a master count. Okay, so you don't want to be the reason for that. So what we had is we would have the log book where you would change your count. We would have our computer where we would change the count. And we would also have a board. H dorm, 124 inmates, and E dorm, 130 inmates. So every time somebody was transferred or sent out to prison from the jail, you have to not only get all that information in all these logbooks, then you go to your board and you change your count. You have to call master control, and you have to say, Master Control, inmate Jones is out to prison. So we've lost one in H dorm. My count is now 129 in H dorm, and Master Control has to log your count for that dorm so that you and Master Control match. So when you call in on the next count, H dorm 129, we match Master Control, and all our logs are matching. Because if you don't, now you're going to have a recount, and shift change is critical. Anthony mentioned that before. If you don't have all that ready for the next shift coming on duty, you're going to go home, and guess who's stuck with your count later on that night that's wrong and messed up. And that's a terrible feeling, to be the one that has to fix the mistake from the other shift. And it's embarrassing. So keep those logs and those counts correct, because what is one of the most important things we do? We have so many important things, but count is like big time. That's how we keep track and to make sure nobody's escaped or gone to the wrong place.
Right now, and for all the people that Gary named, a lot of things that are in play to kind of help validate that count. And believe it or not, even there may be some people like, oh, it's a lot. Guys, you need that consistency because each one is a fail safe. So, the first thing that you do want to check when you're looking at that count is for those consistencies. And at any point there is a inconsistency, like I got 40 here, but I only have 39 inmates here. Guys, that's a big concern. That is a big concern. It sounds like, maybe from someone on the outside looking in, but I've been that officer where, whoa, that's enough to possibly, if you can't figure it out, you got to get a supervisor, because the last thing you want to do is, have to call that count and be off and not know, did I lose an inmate today? Did I gain an inmate today? Because I got my board showing 39, but this guy signed off with 40. And another reason too, guys, check this out. Sometimes we're such habit of routine that, we may just, get in the habit of just constantly signing out. Let's say I work in a maximum security facility where there's very limited movement, lockdown facility, very limited movement, very limited inmates coming in and out. And I'm just used to putting, 40 people on my population, let's say, whatever the population is, every day. But let's say something happens, something unique, and, my population goes down by 1. And I just so stuck in the habit of always putting 40 that when I sign out, I still say 40. Now, when the officer comes in, if they're not doing an actual, count or validating that, they're going to call 40. And the funny thing is, even though the one officer on the prior shift put the information in wrong, the officer coming in to relieve them is the one that's going to get hit hard because it's their job to verify that number. So Gary, 100% yes, this officer screwed me over. They screwed me over, but I also didn't do my due diligence. So, that's a concern too, where this officer may say, oh, you know what? Yeah, I messed up, and I'm sure they'll get a little hit, but don't think you can point at that officer and say, well, I'm going to get out of trouble by saying that they put the number in wrong. No, because you're in a position to verify if that number is correct, right, Gary?
Right, and count should clear before you take that shift over. At least it did with us. The next shift is coming on. We've got the inmates locked down. We've counted, and we're waiting for that call from Master Control. This is the jail saying count clear. Now, one thing, folks, counts have cleared, and they're not correct. That's happened before because things aren't logged properly. So Master Control still thinks your number is 40, but your number's 39. That can happen where count clears, believe it or not, because you're calling in the wrong stuff. So make sure if you come on duty, if you can do a count yourself, you should do a count yourself and say, wait a minute, I count 40 inmates. You say you got 39. I'm not taking this shift over till you fix it.
Yeah, and wow, we could do a whole episode on count. Actually, I'm going to keep it going too because I have other. Let's go. We have other concerns. If you're signing for tools, because we touched on this too, and again, that usually goes in a logbook. Usually, what we call is prayers. Prayers is basically I'm leaving now. These are the things that I'm accounting for. That now I'm handing over to you, and then you kind of sign off, making sure that those things are there. Now, if you have a security item that, let's say that you're responsible, let's say you work in the kitchen area, right? And I'm responsible for 50 tools that need to be utilized in the kitchen, correct? But let's say somewhere along the line, one of those 50 tools break, and I decide, not a problem, and I, do the right thing. I put it through security trash and all this other stuff, but I don't document it in any of the books that I'm now down one tool. So now you have this exchange of shifts. I would like to think that, before this officer gets to leave, that we're counting for the tools to make sure, and you should. But sometimes what happens here, guys, is that when you're coming in on a shift that's already active, the tools may already be out. Still accounted for. Maybe you have the inmates' IDs or however you exchange it. But I would like to think you're still able to do a physical count, but we all know that doesn't always happen, but it should happen. But it doesn't always happen. Now, this officer, when they go to put the tools in, I only got 49. Where's my 50 tool? Now they can't find it. They're calling it in. Supervisor's going to come in, and the first thing we're going to do, check that logbook. If we're missing a tool, let's see where the tool count went down. Okay, so 50, 50, 50, 50, and 50 when you took over today. So at no point did anybody document that a tool was taken out and destroyed or, to drop the tools from 50 to 49. So what's the next step? The supervisor calls the control, lock it down. We got a missing tool. So now we stop all operations, right? The inmates that are at work don't go nowhere. You're not allowed to leave. The inmates that were at work that may have been allowed to leave beforehand, we're going to check their areas. And it turns out that, the whole time the tool was thrown out. But this whole thing, because that person didn't put that in the logbook, can lock down the facility for quite some time. Would you agree with that?
Right. And while the facility is being locked down, because we're not going to wait, you lock it down, but somebody is on the phone, a supervisor, calling to the home of the officer from the prior shift. And they're out at a ball game and they're not answering their cell phone. So now you've got hours and hours, so you can't wait. So now you start shakedown. You know, you're searching for this tool. Finally, the officer gets home from the ball game. Hey, I see you were calling me. I'm sorry, I was at a ball game. Yeah, that was 3 hours ago. We're missing a tool. Oh, yeah, I threw that out today. It got broke. It's in the security trash. And you are just livid. Man, that makes you livid. You've had a shakedown. You're on lockdown, all because it wasn't in the logbook.
Yeah, and I also want to, I mean, again, just things, now we're kind of talking about situation, but I have some more coming my way I'm thinking of right now. Say you have a sick inmate, an inmate that's sick, and they come up to you, I have chest pains, Gant, I'm not feeling good. And, you know, the first thing you do is, I mean, technically, it's not code worthy yet. So we're not at that point where we need to call coaches to inmate that says, I got chest pain. So now what you do is you call your supervisor and you also try to work with medical. And sometimes you may get that medical personnel, sometimes, not all the time, guys. Again, we're talking about rogue. We're not talking about, you know, a generalization of the profession. We're talking about once in a while you do get that rogue individual. And they're not a true representation of what the rest of us are, but it could happen. And you get that one person who says, nope, we just saw that inmate 2 hours ago. We don't need him, see him again. We think that his behavior is motivated. He's playing a game, and we cleared him 2 hours ago. So sometimes you officer, okay, he got seen. We're good. Go back to your cell. Man, document, what's your name? Who are you? Because once you start holding people accountable for their name, all of a sudden the no doesn't become a no anymore. Well, what do you need my name for? Give me your name. You told me that you don't need to see him. You saw him 2 hours ago. I just want to put your name in my logbook. But I would also want to add something else. Besides pushing it on that nurse to hold that nurse responsible, you are actually still responsible to keep it moving too. And what I mean by that is the nurse said no. That may not be enough for me to exhaust my resources. So I may now definitely call my supervisor to come on the scene and say, hey, this guy, tell you something. This guy complained of chest pains. The nurse just told me no. I think the guy still needs to be seen. Now the supervisor, will work on that to make sure that inmate gets brought down to the medical department so custody does what they need to do, present that inmate right to medical. And now if you're going to refuse seeing them, that's a whole different ballgame. Because I do know that all because medical may say over the phone, I don't want to see him, and you take the person's name or whatever it is, but you still feel there is a concern and you don't exhaust that other level, you could still be held sort of responsible because they may say, well, medical didn't want to see him. Well, what did you do next? Well, nothing. Medical didn't want to see him. You didn't call your supervisor? Because as a sergeant, what could the sergeant have done? He could have brought that inmate directly to medical, and then at least we've done our part. But now, now we're a little bit, we're a little bit more involved than we should be. It's like, you know what? Let's just, hey, Sarge, I still think the inmate, let's get that inmate over to medical. But the reason why I say that story is when again, goes back to the specifics. It's not a generalization of a nurse told me no, they don't want to see the inmate. It's nurse such and such said no at this time, blah, blah, blah. So now if something, God forbid, does happen, now we go back and be able to specifically say who that nurse is, as opposed to you just saying it's a nurse and they don't know where to go. Like the people doing the investigation could be any nurse because there's 15 nurses working that shift. And I'll guarantee you when shit hits the fan, there's not going to be a nurse that's going to say, oh, that was me that said no. You know what I mean? And you know what, can I be honest with you, just to be fair to on the civilian side, when you do have concerns, recently I had an email from a chaplain who said that he felt that when he was talking to an inmate, this inmate could have posed a threat to staff. There was something about that. The moment staff's gonna open the door, he's gonna fuck them up. So he went and told the supervisor, and he felt that the supervisor didn't do enough. He goes, "What should I do?" I said, did you document anything? And he said, I don't know if he did, but I said, well, what you're going to do is you're going to document the specific supervisor you told. And if you still feel it's not happening, write to admin, your chaplaincy, talk directly to admin. But again, you're making an effort to save someone's life. But the key here is once you document and put someone's name in there, I spoke to York, I spoke to Gangi, watch how behaviors change. You know, it's not I spoke to a supervisor and we could defer responsibility. It's I spoke to Gangi or I spoke to nurse such and such. So, I mean, those stories about medical, Gary, I'm sure you've dealt with that a few times, correct?
Well, what you're talking about is holding people accountable, making them do their job. I'm sure not going to leave my shift and go home with an inmate. Now, we all know inmates use the heart attack thing a lot, but some of them are real. But you know what? I can't sit there and guess. I'm not medical. I'm not a doctor. I'm not going to sit there and try to guess. Is the inmate really having heart pains, chest pains? I want to go home knowing that inmate has seen somebody in medical. So absolutely, if medical says no, I'm going to call supervisor. And you know what a supervisor is going to do. Oh, I'm not having that on me either. We're getting somebody in medical to look at this inmate. And then we're going to get that documented. Now, I know we're jumping to a lot of stuff here because documentation is everything we do. I do want to get one thing before I forget. I'm not going to dwell on it. But use of force. Now, I recently had somebody ask me a question. I won't say who, but they called me and said, hey, I've got this video. And this officer is punched this inmate during a use of force during a cell extraction, or while they were putting him in the cell, whatever the case may be. My first question, Anthony probably knows what my first question was. Did he document it in his use of force report? Why, yes. Okay, that's good. Now, I'm not saying that it doesn't warrant further review, but that's good. That's what you want to hear. Because if I have a video that shows you hitting an inmate and you put it in your report, I have a lot more belief in you because you didn't hide it. You didn't omit it from your report. So now that I know that you wrote it in your report and you gave a reason why you did it, we feel pretty good now. Now, we may go and review this use of force a little further, but I'm feeling pretty good because you didn't omit it from your report and you didn't lie. And that will save your job, folks, on these use of force reports. Just put why you did it. If you get scared afterwards, say, darn, maybe it's too late. It's already done. Put why you did it. Number one, you're being truthful. You documented it, and we'll work with you and try to figure it out.
Yeah, and by the way, guys, the stuff that you document in the logbook, some stuff may require a specialized report. Like, again, we talked about the tool incident. Yeah, you put that in the logbook, but you also should submit a report saying that this tool is broken. So we have multiple ways to look up the information. And again, it's all fail-safes because we expect human error. And maybe, you know, someone didn't write it in the logbook, but at least we have that report. So a lot of the concerns we're talking about, it's put in the logbook, but there are going to be supplemental reports connected to that. So the logbook, again, has that consistency, time, location, whatever it is, the names. But the reports are going to be more detailed. But again, like, you know, the if there is a count concern, like we talked about before, you know, you're going to have to write a report along with what's already been in the specifics of what's in that logbook, because the report is going to be more about your actions to rectify or why the count was wrong. But with that said, again, it is about the documentation, stuff that we can fall back on so we know that this is where we're at. So again, the missing tool, you know, the routine I would have is log it, drop the count, but also write a report, submit it to my supervisor and let them know I lost a tool today. The more that people know, the more that it's going to pass on to the next shift, you know, or it's going to pass on to the next person taking over that level of responsibility. So logbooks are quick and immediate. It's right in front of me. But again, you know, the reports are what gets submitted. You know, the reports are there available for the supervisors also to sign off on. You know, okay, so he lost a tool today, not a problem. And I have confirmed that the tool was thrown out in the security trash. You know what I mean? Again, that's more of of a report, and then that gets sent to like the shift commander, whatever it is, and then all that stuff also gets documented. And again, that again, just the amount of fail safes. And even when you mention with the use of force, you know, documentation's key, obviously, because if you use something, say it. You know, most times is people get so afraid to say what they've done that they're not in trouble for what they've done. They just fail to say it. They just fail to put it in the report that they did this or did that. You know, and guys, the key here, guys, is when the investigators are looking at, you know, this investigation, what they're going to do is if there's any videos, we go by videos. But if, you know, videos match with reports. But if there's no videos, because sometimes that could be the case, they look for inconsistencies in those reports, you know, and if by chance there's a slight bit of inconsistency that is like you can always have a little bit of difference because we all may see things differently, but there are certain things that, you know, are just too extreme that there's no way that two people would see these two things differently. And the problem is that when people tend to write their reports, they're very concerned about their actions, not knowing that maybe their actions were in compliance, but they're afraid to put it in because they're afraid that, you know what, admin's going to wonder why I did that, so I'm just not going to put it in there. But later on, when it's discovered that you had to hit this inmate or you had to spray this inmate, you were perfectly in compliance, but you didn't put it on your report. And it's hard for us to believe that, you know, when these two inmates were fighting or when the inmate came after, whatever it is, that you don't remember OCing them. You know, I understand maybe during the fight or during the tassel, you may forget how many times you hit the person. I get that. But the initial action you take and the final action is usually something you remember. The initial action is what you do to protect yourself. High emotion should be that OC if you have the chance. And obviously the final action is hopefully securing the non-compliant inmate. But I think that was definitely something noteworthy. Like, if it happened, write it, because the last thing you want is to be questioned on the integrity of your report. And by the way, as I said, you may not remember everything, but you can always add on if it doesn't mess with the integrity of your report, because even the investigators may ask you a question that you didn't think of. Doesn't mean it changes the integrity of the report, because some people were like, well, I'm not going to write you know, because I don't want to mess with my report. Hold on, it doesn't. It connects to what you already have. You just don't want to write anything that, you know, switches the integrity of what you wrote prior. Correct, Gar?
Right. You don't want it to change the scenario totally the opposite way. Then people are like, wait a minute, you know, that's just a little too much. But I forgot something. Come on, we're human beings. Darn, I forgot something and I've already turned my report in. Do a supplemental if you have to. Tell your supervisor, man, I got to do a supplemental. There was something that occurred. Or if you're being questioned by an inspector, you can say, you know what, this did occur. And I totally forgot, but this did occur. You can say that. You know, nobody's going to crucify you because you remembered something and you're adding on to what you did. That is just human nature. We can't remember every little thing. And then sometimes we remember something later on. Don't let that scare you. As long as you're truthful and as long as it is with the integrity of your report, you're fine.
I think we have a lot of tangents. I mean, we definitely can do multiple shows on certain areas that we discussed today. But hey, Gary, you have anything you'd like to say in closing? Yes,
I was about to say the same thing. You could do a show on every different area we talked about. Everybody, never be scared to write. If you are not a great writer or you feel like you have a fear of having to write reports, please practice or please go to someone and ask for help. But don't go and let somebody else type your report for you all the time, because you're never going to learn. And I'm saying that because that has happened. Learn how to write these reports and document. You don't have to be a English major, okay? But get rid of that fear of writing, because in corrections today, document. You're going to have to be able to write and get these things out there. And Also, one quick one. It would be another show by itself. Document all inmate threats, and I'm going to leave it at that. We can do another show on that another time. Document all inmate threats. Just believe me on that one. Stay safe, and thank you for your service.
Yeah, guys, I agree. I mean, we kind of focused a lot on the logbooks, and I want people to realize that obviously a lot of the stuff you put in the logbook is going to require detailed reports. We kind of went into like this logbook thing because, again, that does take precedence too. But you're right. Everything also, there's going to be backup reports on pretty much everything that we talked about today, just for those extra fail-safes. Because again, when those people are looking for that information, I want the logbook, I want the reports, I want everything, and then they want to review it at, basically, if it goes up to the highest level of the court system, they want everything in front of them to look for inconsistencies. And that's from both sides, by the way. The side of the person pushing the case and the side of the defendant are all looking for inconsistencies. But definitely a great dialogue, a lot of stuff to explore for later discussions. As always, guys, the show is tiered up. If you haven't, please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. Bell's going to notify you every time I post a video. Stay safe.